Hello and welcome to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley, and this program is sponsored by an organization called Civication Incorporated. Civication Incorporated has a website, a 501c3 organization. You can look at our website and see that we endeavor to promote civic learning and civil responsibility in all people who reside in America. This program, Civil Discourse, tends to take sometimes controversial issues and discusses them in an in-depth yet civil manner. You know what's coming up? In Election Day. This is midterm elections. You should have all received your sample ballot in the mail. Jerry Holland, the supervisor of elections for Duval County, does a very good job of getting these sample ballots prepared and getting them out to all of the people who are registered to vote. And if you're not registered to vote, get registered to vote. You can give this show a call and we'll show you how to do that. But this particular election isn't just a simple thing. If you haven't read your sample ballot or know what's on the ballot, you're going to be in for a surprise when you get to the ballot box, because there are amendments to the Constitution. And with us in the studio to discuss these amendments are two guests. One, Adam Deli. Adam is the president of the American Civil Liberties Union of Northeast Florida, chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. He's a graduate of the Florida Coastal School of Law and a practicing attorney in Jacksonville. And Erica Thurman is the regional coordinator of an organization called People Over Politics. And they are here to discuss with me Amendments 5 and 6 on the ballot. Amendments 5 and 6. So let me start with both of you first saying thank you for being here. I appreciate it. We're going to go very quickly here. Amendments 5 and 6. Erica, we'll start with you. Quickly, what are they and why do we need them?
Amendments 5 and 6 are redistricting amendments.
Redistricting amendments.
Yes, and redistricting happens every 10 years after the census based on whether there's population increases or decreases to ensure that each district is equal in proportion.
And that's a mandate from the United States Constitution. Yes. The United States Constitution says that after each census that the states must do this, and equal in proportion in terms of population. Yes. Correct? Adam, what does that mean to you? And right now, as it sits right now, where are we at with that? In terms of the division of population, how many people are in each district?
Well, according to the latest projections by the United States Census Bureau as of 2009, the state of Florida has approximately 18.5 million people living here. We have 25 different congressional representatives, so if you divide that, it comes out to be a little bit more than 800,000 people assigned per representative from the state of Florida.
Per congressional district.
Yes.
Per congressional district. There's 435 congressional districts in the country, and the state of Florida has how many?
25.
25. And this amendment seeks to amend the Florida Constitution to do what? What does the Florida Constitution say? Right, well, I happen to have it right here. Section 16, legislative apportionment. And I'm going to read just a piece of this. It's kind of lengthy, but you can check out your Florida Constitution online at myflorida.com or Sunshine. There's a lot of places you can get this. But Section 16 says, senatorial and representative districts. The legislature, at its regular session in the second year following each decennial census, by joint resolution, shall apportion the state in accordance with the Constitution of the state and of the United States into not less than 30 nor more than 40 consecutively numbered senatorial districts of either contiguous, overlapping, or identical territory, and into not less than 80 nor more than 120 consecutive numbered representative districts of either contiguous, overlapping, or identical territory. All right, and then it goes on to say, should they not be able to do that, there's provisions for making special sessions. But that's all it says. It says they're charged with doing this. What these amendments do are outline more specific rules, correct?
Yes.
Why do we need the rules?
Well, as it stands, contiguity is pretty much the only standard that's clearly outlined. What that means is that there's a lot of leeway, so that when legislatures are redrawing these districts, they're free to draw them in a way that favors their own re-election. 5 and 6 seeks to put into place more rules so that when drawing these districts, they have to keep in mind the interests of the people.
You mentioned the congressional seats and the congressional, and 435 representatives in the country, 25, that's congressional, but the state legislature is the one who is charged with drawing the map. And over here we see a map a map, and these different colored sections on this map are the districts as they sit right now.
That's correct.
All right, and contiguous means adjacent. They have to be next to each other. Well, it'd be impossible to have anything that's not next to each other. This is next to that, that's next to that. Obviously, that's not next to that, but that's not what contiguous means. It has to be adjacent. What's wrong with the way this is?
Well, there are several things. If you look at a couple of these districts, like number 16, it stretches from the Atlantic to the Gulf.
Point out number 16.
Number 16 is right here. It might be hard to see the color coding with the glare, but it begins right about here, which is a little bit east of Naples and southeast of Sarasota.
Yeah.
Continues down, touches a little southwest of Okeechobee, comes back up, juts up here, comes back around, and comes back down the coast a little bit.
Okay. And one of the governing factors is beyond the contiguous factor is the number of people that live there. Each of these districts are supposed to be relatively the same in population numbers.
Correct.
Well, you're going to have a lot more people in the Miami area, the Jacksonville area, the Orlando, Tampa, Pensacola area than you are going to have in the Everglades area and the very district we're talking about. So how else could it be? I mean, what would you suggest? What would this amendment do that would change the way that would look?
Well, one, it would introduce compactness in terms of those districts, which for the people is going to mean better access to their representatives. The vast majority of people have no idea who their representative is.
The vast majority of the people don't know who the vice president is.
That's true.
That's one of the things civication is doing. We're seeking an endeavor to educate the population about what it means to have representative government. So it's very important. I'm happy you're here for this. So I agree the vast majority of the people do not know that. I think the vast majority of the people don't know who the ACLU is.
That's quite possible. But I didn't want to...
Go ahead. Continue.
So in terms of introducing, as I said, the compact standard, what it does for the people is bring that accessibility to their representatives. It gives their representatives a better likelihood of knowing what sorts of issues these people face on a day-to-day basis. That population is primarily the goal, equality in population. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be drawn in this jigsaw sort of weird Tetris game that we see here. You can get those numbers and still draw these districts in a compact and contiguous way.
For instance, I mean, if you just look at 16 again, if you wrap around to come back down, it also means that District 23 here is jutting up. Now, I don't have exact numbers for these areas, but you can't tell me that not enough people live right here, that we could have used this here and used this as part of District 23. And so by contiguous, right now this is contiguous because there is a continuous line through this yellow section, but it's still disjunct because you have districts that jut in between each other's like different amoeba and fingers of something, and that creates a separation even among the residents of individual counties.
So you're saying outright that these are drawn by people who are incumbents, and they are drawn specifically to assure that certain incumbents will remain incumbents?
Yes.
And you think that's a bad thing?
Yes.
In and of itself, having incumbents is a bad thing?
No, not in and of itself. In and of itself, having incumbents select their districts so that their re-election is basically guaranteed is a bad thing.
Who by name would you suggest this favors?
Incumbents.
All of the incumbents? All of them? Okay.
Well, in the
This is really a nonpartisan issue because each of these districts, they're not all Republican and they're not all Democrat, and neither party, those being the two dominant parties, unfortunately, in this country, neither of those parties does any more or less of this than the other, except as far as they hold political office. You know, there are possibly more Democrats than Republicans or vice versa, but both parties do this. This is really a non-political issue. It's a incumbent versus power and vote to the people issue.
In the last 3 election cycles, out of 420 seats, only 3 incumbents were unseated. That's a very high percentage of incumbents maintaining their seats. And as I said, most of these districts, in terms of the way that they're drawn, can only be justified in that manner. As you said, yes, you are going to have to there's going to be some sophistication needed with drawing them to ensure that the populations are equal. There may be some districts, because of sparse population, that are considerably larger than others. However, that you couldn't get, say, District 16 without wrapping around District 23 in the way that it has been doesn't seem likely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and by incumbents, again, we're talking at the federal level. We're not talking at the state level, although the state level is the one who draws these boundaries. Right. Well, Corinne Brown's name comes up as somebody who might be targeted as a result of this legislation passing. Would you agree that that's a name that people have thrown around?
I agree that that's a name that's out there related to this issue, but I would not say that these amendments target her. Mm-hmm. She has targeted the amendments as far as leading the crusade to shoot them down.
Yeah, she started a coalition of her own called Nix 5 and 6.
She also brought a lawsuit against the state attorney general, which failed. Luckily, she actually tried to get the amendments thrown off of the ballot so that they wouldn't even be an issue.
But she makes an argument, though. Yeah. She makes an argument relative to representation. I've interviewed Corinne specifically regarding this issue on the radio with her. We talked about a half hour regarding this, and her argument is if it wasn't drawn like this, that her district is up here in this blue. It starts way up here in Jacksonville and comes way down here. That blue section, it's long and kind of meanders down the St. Johns River. But her argument is if it wasn't drawn that way, that the people she represents would not have representation. They would not have fair representation. It would not be fair and equitable. They would have a representative, but that representative wouldn't represent the minorities that she proclaims to represent. How do you respond to that?
Well, first there's the idea that individuals of a particular group necessarily have to be represented by a person who shares certain cultural or racial identities. The interests of underrepresented minority groups can be upheld by anyone that they so choose. If her constituents believe that the job she is doing is one that is in their best interest, however that district is drawn, they will keep her there.
If she is the right person for, or she or anybody, and I don't want to turn this into let's bash Corinne time, but she or anyone in power that the current system favors. Like Erica just said, if you are the best person for the job, then you should be able to win without rigging the system. Is really as simple as it boils down.
Well, rigging the system and having rules that to govern the selection of the boundaries may be two different issues. It's true that we're mandated to do this every 10 years by the census, and it's also true that a lot of these have been challenged in court as a result of the boundaries being drawn. Is that correct? At least more recently than maybe over the years past, that the courts have made decisions as to whether or not this has been fair or not, based on the rules?
That is correct, but the ones that I'm aware of are under the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act. So this, in that vein, this effectively would give another avenue in a completely different system of jurisprudence in order to be able to challenge these type of things. You wouldn't necessarily have to go to federal court based on a federal statute. If it's part of the Florida Constitution, then to the extent that it is brought before a court, it would be a Florida court deciding this. The way it currently is with a federal voting rights issue, the lawsuit has to be brought in the District of Columbia, in that federal district court. It could do better to leave it to a state court system to be the one to actually make this decision.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, I want to ask you, I'm going to talk a little bit about the language in the proposed amendments. I want to talk about what your efforts are to talk about this beyond what you're doing here on Civil Discourse, and I want to get into a couple other questions that we've got. You're watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is still Ken Hurley, and take a look at this. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley, and this program is sponsored by Civication Incorporated. Check us out on the website, civication.org. We promote civic education and civil responsibility, and one of the things that a civilian, a citizen should do is vote when it's time to vote. And we have an election coming up, and it's very important to vote. You should have received your sample ballot in the mail. If you haven't, talk to Jerry Holland in Duval County, the supervisor of elections. You've got a crack staff of people who do send this out and prepare it, and it's very useful. And on it is something called Amendment 5 and Amendment 6 and several other things. You're voting for the governor, you're voting for a lot of things, but these are lengthy amendments. And if you read them for the first time in the ballot, you might be a little more confused than you need to be and take a lot more time at the polling place. So let's talk, and we're talking with Adam Deli from the American Civil Liberties Union and Erica Thurman, the regional director of an organization called People Over Politics. Help me understand the distinction between fair districts and people over politics. Erica.
Okay, well, the movement to have these amendments passed on the ballot is the efforts of a coalition that includes People Over Politics, Fair Districts Florida, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and the AARP, as well as some other groups. Mm-hmm. And so overall, all of these groups, as I said, are working to get these amendments passed on the ballot this November 2nd.
Okay. So it's a coalition. What is People Over Politics versus fair districts? What's the difference between the two?
There is no real difference. It's just different methods and different efforts in various places. People Over Politics does a lot in terms of educating overall, but primarily focusing on educating underrepresented groups as well on these amendments. As you said, reading them on the ballot for the first time in November is going to be time consuming. So what we seek to do is get out that information now so that people are aware and they can make an informed decision.
Is there such a thing as people without politics? Is there such a thing as politics without people? I mean, don't they go together?
Yes.
I mean, people can separate themselves from politics and not be involved, but once you say, get involved in the state legislature, doesn't that become political, and you can't do it without people, right? Abe Lincoln said, government for the people, by the people, of the people. What does it mean to be over politics?
Well, right now we have a system where the legislators choose their voters. Instead of the voters choosing their representatives, the voters are being chosen through this complex system of voter prediction. They're chosen by individuals who believe that they're going to put them back into office. People Over Politics basically puts the people where they belong in the driver's seat, so that when these districts are being drawn, the people's interests are what are kept in mind. Mm-hmm.
The people's interest as opposed to the incumbent's interest.
Yes.
We were talking earlier about what the Florida Constitution says right now, and these are new. My understanding is that these amendments will be new to the Florida Constitution, which now commands that the state legislature form a joint resolution between the House and the Senate to figure out how to draw the maps. This would make it the rules so that they have to follow what's in the Constitution. Why do we need a constitutional amendment to tell the people in Tallahassee how to govern themselves?
Well, I think we touched on this earlier, that right now there are some guidelines in Section 16 which talk about contiguity as well as population. And I think a look at the map in detail, especially some of the more egregious areas in the southeastern corridor and the area of Greater Orlando, shows that while contiguous, they're not necessarily compact, and that begs the question of what the real purpose behind the way these districts are drawn is. And so these amendments basically, if you will, clarify the current provisions of the Constitution and give further guidance of how the district should be drawn.
Well, why an amendment as opposed to policies and procedures, as opposed to joint resolutions? Why aren't the joint resolutions working, I guess is the question. But before we spend more time on trying to answer that, let's say what is the difference between Amendment 5 and Amendment 6. Amendment 5 is for the legislative redistricting state of Florida, and Amendment 6 is the congressional redistricting of the state of Florida. And if I may, I'd like to actually read the text.
Please.
May I do that? It's essentially the same text, but one refers to legislative, one refers to congressional.
That's
okay?
correct.
Full text: in establishing the legislative district boundaries, 1, no apportionment plan or district shall be drawn with the intent to favor or disfavor a political party or an incumbent. And districts shall not be drawn with the intent or result of denying or abridging the equal opportunity of racial or language minorities to participate in the political process or to diminish their ability to elect representatives of their choice, and districts shall consist of contiguous territory. 2, unless compliance with the standards of this subsection conflicts with the standards in subsection 1 or with federal law, districts shall be as nearly equal in population as is practicable. Districts shall be compact, and districts shall, where feasible, utilize existing political and geographical boundaries. 3, the order in which the standards with subsections 1 and 2 of this section are set forth shall not be read to establish any priority of one standard over the other with that subsection. Well, clearly, they're very concerned with the challenge that this will affect minority representation, because they're talking about specifically, hey, this isn't going to affect minority representation. That's what NICS 5 and 6 charges, that this will minimize, if not eliminate, minority representation. How do you respond?
It's important to look at the actual population statistic numbers. We touched earlier that Florida has about 18.5 million people. Again, that's an estimate which will be clarified, if not confirmed, by the end of this year with the 2010 census. Of those 18.5 million people, 21.5% are Hispanic. 16.1% are black or African American. And so those two numbers together turn out to be 37.6, which is more than a third, being 33%. So the way things are right now with respect to congressional districts, we have 25 Congress people from Florida. Right now there are 5 that represent minorities. That only constitutes 20%. There are 3 African Americans and there are 2 Cuban Americans, excuse me. Just based on the numerical analysis, you know, there should be more. Hispanics alone should have 20%, which would be 5 representatives, and blacks alone should have at least 3. And there should be 8 to 9 of the 25 congressional seats represented by minorities, which is just not the case.
Well, you need these folks to run for office. I mean, they don't always run. I mean, it could not be the case because they weren't political candidates. That's one possibility.
That's one possibility. It's also
what NICS 5 and 6 suggests is that the minority representation is on the rise right now, whether we put this amendment in place or not. That's a trend that can be verified that seems to be true. I mean, according to their website, 3 African American members are in place, 3 Hispanics. 3 Hispanics have been serving in the Florida Senate. 3 Hispanics are Florida Congressional delegation, up from 0 in 1990. I mean, just because they're not there there's lots of reasons why they could not be there. To suggest that it's because of the way the map is drawn is only one possible reason, correct?
that is a possibility.
Right,
and I think it's pure speculation to say one way or the other that, you know, the only reason they're not there, more minority representation, is because they didn't run. I think Erica mentioned a moment ago that in the past 6 years, the past 3 elections, there were 420 different seats up for election, and only 3 incumbents in 6 years over 420 elections across the state of Florida were unseated. So the argument is, with whether it's a minority issue or not, the playing field is not as level, and there's not an equal opportunity of fairness to run for office, because they draw the line so that they cannot be unelected.
And quite simply, these amendments, as stated in the amendments, don't supersede federal law. The Voting Rights Act protects the opportunity for individuals of underrepresented groups to elect representatives of their choice. It's very simple. As I said, there's a provision there that explicitly states that, you know, unless, let's see here, unless compliance with the standards conflicts in subsection 1 or with federal law.
Well, you're a coalition you're calling yourself People Over Politics, which is an offshoot out of the American Civil Liberties Union, which is part of the Fair Districting organization, of which the Congressional Black Caucus is a member of, the NAACP is a member of. People who are known for representing minorities are parts of this coalition, correct?
Yes.
So you would think that if they were concerned that minority represented would be eliminated or diminished as a result of these amendments getting passed, they wouldn't put their name behind the coalition, correct?
Exactly.
All right. And when you look at Protect Your Vote contributions, the NICS 5 and 6, and all this is online, and your responsibility as being civilly responsible is to make up your own mind and decide how to vote. It's a yes or a no vote, but your vote does matter. 60% of the people who vote have to vote in favor of this to pass. That's how significant this is, and this was put on the ballot by a citizens' initiative of which 1.7 million people signed a petition saying we'd like to have this on the ballot to give us the opportunity to say how these maps might get drawn. But I think it's also interesting to know who makes financial contributions. If you look at the NICS 5 and 6 website, they say that the Republican Party of Florida has given $750,000 to defeat these amendments. Has the Democratic Party given money to support the amendments?
Do you happen to know the answer to that?
I'll have to get that information.
Yeah, we're not privy to
know. Well, one of the
information.
charges is that this is a Democratic power grab. How do you respond to that?
Whoever is in power, be it whichever party, is the party that has an interest in maintaining that control, which is why the movement for fair districts is a nonpartisan effort. Right now, there happens to be a Republican majority, and so they do have an interest in maintaining that. Whichever party has been in power over the years has sought to maintain that power. And so that right now they are in power and have given $750,000 in an effort to NICS 5 and 6 is not surprising.
Keep themselves in power is what you're suggesting. Well, we're almost out of time. What I want to do is first, before we go, is thank you both, Adam and Erica, for being here. This time flew by. But I want to give you each like 10 seconds to sum this up. 10 seconds. Go, Adam. 10 seconds.
I encourage you to find maps and just look at them in detail, because I think when you do, it will literally speak for itself.
Okay, Erica?
Amendments 5 and 6 are all about putting the power back into the hands of the people.
All about putting power back into the hands of the people. People, get ready for the power. It's coming your way if these get passed. According to Erica, you've been watching a program called Civil Discourse. My name is Ken Hurley. We appreciate your viewership. We'd love to hear from you. Contact information is following on the credits. Please give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Thank you for participating in Civil Discourse, a program that discusses controversial issues in a civil manner. Let us know, friend or foe, we want you on our show. You may contact us in the following ways. Please email your comments to me, Ken, at civication.org, or snail mail at 4830 Atlantic Boulevard, Jacksonville, Florida, 32207, or call us at 904-591-7634. Civication Incorporated is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational organization.